Hey Grace Church, my name is Josh. Welcome to the weekly for the week of November 13th. Today we are talking about Jesus and power. So this week feels like a repeat from a couple weeks ago where Jesus predicts his death and the disciples follow that up with a conversation about who's the greatest. Well, a couple verses later, Jesus predicts his death for the third time and the disciples come along and again they ask, this time it's James and John, they say, hey, when you come into your kingdom, Jesus, can we sit on your right hand and on your left? And what's crazy about this is that last week we spent the whole time talking about the gospel and how Jesus was going to go to the cross in our place. And in verse 35 of Mark chapter 10, it says, then, like right then, after that whole gospel thing, James and John come and they ask to sit at his right hand and left hand. It's almost like they're saying, hey, you going to the cross, Jesus, that's horrible news. That's bad. We're probably going to sit back on that part. But when you come into your kingdom after all that bad stuff, could we sit at your right hand and your left hand? And the other 10 hear about this and they come forward and they don't say to James and John, how insensitive of you. Like, Jesus just talked about dying and resurrecting for our sakes. They don't say that. They say, what about us? We want in on this too. And so again, Jesus gathers the disciples and he tells them, hey, listen up. You know how in the world, the rulers, they lord over their followers? And the disciples are like, yes, we know how it works in the world. That's why we want to be number 2 and number 3. We want to be up at the top. Jesus gathers them together and he says 4 words. These are the 4 words we have to get. In light of the way the world does power, the way that all resources go up, Jesus gathers his disciples and says, not so with you. Not so with you. You know how it plays out in culture. You know how they do this. That's not how it works in the kingdom. Because in culture, whoever is on the bottom, they have the role of giving all the privileges, resources, advantages, and all the honor goes up to the leader. So ultimately our goal as people is to climb the ladder so that we can get more of this stuff. Jesus flips that whole pyramid upside down. And he says, if you want to be great, if you want to be the leader, then it's your job to be the servant of all. So the more powerful a person is, the more someone has resources and influence, the more they are to get behind others and serve others. There's nothing in this text that says power is not a good thing. Jesus doesn't do that. And so here's the principle that I tried to make sure that we understood, is that Jesus, he doesn't relinquish his power, he redefines his power. And so Jesus is not asking you to relinquish your power. He's asking you to redefine your power. He's not asking you to get rid of your influence. He's asking you to redefine your influence so that you can start asking questions of those around you. Who can I serve? Do I have personal concern for the people that I lead? How can I get underneath their burdens? Because the more influence and power you have, the more resources you have to give away to others. And that is upside down from the way the world does it. In Ephesians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul, he calls this mutual submission. That if we will mutually submit to one another, if we will bear one another's burdens, then we will find inside of the church an org chart that looks different than any org chart in this world. Because we look at each other and we think, how can I facilitate your success? How can I serve you? Regardless of where you are in the hierarchy of the world, regardless of where you are on the org chart, how can I leverage my resources to facilitate your success? How can I look at you and say, you're essential to this work? That's why in the church, the primary metaphor is not a metaphor of hierarchy. It's not a metaphor of a ladder. It's a metaphor of a body. And everyone's essential in the body. And so Jesus says, wherever you find yourself, you have to look around and say, you're all essential. So how can I help you? How can I come alongside you? How can I responsibly take initiative to come into your world and say, let me help you, let me lift some of your burdens. And that's what leadership in the kingdom looks like. We've all had moments in our lives where maybe a person in authority, a boss, leveraged you for their resources, leveraged you for their gain, and that doesn't feel good. We've also had moments maybe where you had a boss or someone in authority do the opposite and serve you, and that really was moving to you. And so as believers, again, Jesus isn't asking us to relinquish our power. He's asking us, if you have power, it's an opportunity to either put on display the glory of God, to bring forth good witness, or it's an opportunity to harm your witness and show people that maybe Jesus isn't what he says he is after all. So there's actually a lot of possibilities anytime you are in influence and in leadership. And we should be mindful of that as we walk through the world. So this concept of Jesus being a servant to all, and this concept of Jesus lowering himself to serve others, is really most poignantly actualized when the disciples go into Jerusalem. There's this triumphant entry, and they finally get to the house they're going to, and the disciples forget to find someone who would wash the feet of everyone, which was a traditional thing you would do when you went into a new place. And so Jesus, in that moment, he takes the towel and he goes and washes the disciples' feet. And he tells them, I'm your Lord and your master. Again, he doesn't relinquish his authority. He is that. It's not false humility. It's real. It's true humility. He knows who he is. And it's from who he is that he leverages his resources and says, I have washed your feet. Now go and do that to others. And the disciples are so moved by this. In Acts chapter 6, when the early church is taking off, the apostles are found serving tables and helping the food distribution among the widows. They're serving actively. They have to be pulled away from the towel, pulled away from serving tables to teach the word of God, because something happened in their heart because of the model of Christ. And so as followers of Jesus today, are we leveraging our power for the service of others, or are we hoarding our power for ourselves? That's a question that we have to grapple with and say, do we look at our lives and compare them to the life of Jesus and say, man, we are serving like him. We are gracious like Jesus. We are lowly like Jesus. Or the opposite. No, we are high and mighty. We are high and exalted. We are above serving because we're in charge. And so the question is, what do you do with your ego? What do you do with your leadership? What do you do with your place of prominence? Because what Jesus did is he washed feet. And so anytime you maybe have an ego moment, you could ask yourself, do I need to go and find more feet to wash? Because that's how you can humble yourself and become more like Jesus.